Question 1. What power source was used for indoor heating before electricity? Obviously, it wasn't the electric heater. Was it geothermal energy, animal body heat, sunlight, or fire? Well, the problem with sunlight is that it can't be inside all the time, especially not at night. Animal body heat would be fine, I guess, if we were animals, but no, we're civilized people. Geothermal energy still isn't really properly utilized even in today's society, so our correct answer is going to be fire. The source of fire, though, tended to vary. It might be a wood fire, or a coal fire, or an oil fire, or a gas fire, depending on which century you're living in. Question 2. Which source of energy was not used before electricity? Water power, nuclear power, wind power, or solar power? All of these power sources can be used to produce electricity, which we'll be learning about a little later on. But all of them have been used for different purposes before the invention of electricity. So let's go through our options. Water power was of course used to turn water wheels, which would do things like mill grain. Wind power was used for the same purpose in windmills, and also used for things like sailing in order to speed up the ships with the sails. So what's our last option then? Is it nuclear power or solar power? Well, both of them come from the energy of an atom, funnily enough, but we haven't been using nuclear power very long. We have, however, been using solar power, which is used to do things like light and heat houses during the day, of course, as well as doing things like drying clothes. Nuclear power is the only source of energy that wasn't used before the invention of electricity. It was only discovered in 1896. In fact, by 1896, electric generators had already been developed and invented. Question 3. Give an example of a task that is today performed with electricity, but was once performed by hand. Describe how the amounts of labor involved in each task has changed. I'm sure that you can already think of some sort of example, and of course the amount of labor involved drastically goes down when electricity is involved. So here's an example that I've come up with. Sending messages long distance. Before the advent of electricity, if we wanted to send a message long distance, we needed a messenger from the post service. These days, messages can be sent as electric signals through things like phones, fax machines, computers, or telegraphs. Telegraphs is of course a bit ancient by now, but it is still use of electricity. Electric signals are able to move down wires, and they don't need to be carried by any messenger. Electric transmissions tend to be a lot faster, and they tend to cut down a lot of the labor involved, because of course we don't need a messenger to run to and fro. Question 4. List 7 uses of electricity. At first 7 seems like a lot, but it shouldn't really be too hard. Right, had enough time to think of all of them? Let's go. Lighting is one of the most common uses, the other being heating. Fair enough, light, heat. Other uses include locomotion, that is, movement, using electricity to power things like electric cars or trains. Entertainment, things like music players, video cameras, for that matter, microphones. Cooling, they use to power fans and air conditioning. Computing, of course, is a very important use. And perhaps communication. We can send messages long distance using telephones or telegraphs or things like that. Question 5. Outline the changes that have occurred in the main sources of domestic energy over time. Alright, so we went through a list of these a little earlier. Let's see how many of them we can remember. Prehistoric humans were able to use fire, which of course extracts the chemical energy stored in wood or other combustible objects. We were of course able to use the energy of animals in order to help us out with farming and things like that. Improved technology allowed us to harness the power of wind and water for things like milling grain or sailing. Finally, as we get closer and closer to the Industrial Revolution, we end up with power sources like coal, oil, and gas, which he burned, just like wood, in order to gain the chemical energy stored within. Today, we use the same sources of energy in order to produce electricity, which can be transmitted long distance. Beyond this, we can even use nuclear power to produce this sort of electricity. So that's the end of the questions. In this section, we've learned about the different sources of domestic energy over time, how they've evolved from things like wood and wind and water to more advanced fossil fuels like coal, oil, and gas.